Here we're going to deal with transitioning into vamping and transitioning out of vamping backup for the key of G. So one way to practice the transitions is to take the last couple of measures of a break or a round of roll backup, and then go into your first couple of measures or so of vamping, and just keep on looping that. So the tail end of last two measures of one of your breaks or your backup parts in the key of G might be something like this. So then going into vamping, right after that will involve moving the right hand away from the bridge to where the neck and the pot meet, and moving your left hand up the neck here to the mid region of the neck for your D-shaped G chord here. And notice that as I do this, that as soon as I no longer need my left hand in the first few frets of the banjo here, once I'm done there, I'm just playing a measure's worth of open strings, I immediately get my left hand ready for my first vamping chord here. So this hand, the left hand will go up the neck first, and then the right hand will join it. And so we get this. One and two and one and two and again. One and two and one and two and one and two and one and two and two and one and two and for some songs the chord progression in the key of G will start on a C chord, so not a bad idea to practice the same transition going into a C chord instead of a G chord. Songs like This Land Is Your Land, Gold Watch and Chain, Little Darling Pal of Mine, Way Downtown, etc., etc. One, two, one, two. One, two, one, two. Okay, and some songs, your round of your progression doesn't always end with two measures of the G chord when you're in the key of G. Sometimes you might have a measure of D7 followed by a measure of G, and then the progression starts again. So you can, it's a good idea to practice a variety of different transitions that might happen in songs. So here's going from a D7, measure of D7 to a measure of G, and then the progression starts again on a G chord. And one. Ah, well, I really flubbed that one. Here it is again. One, two, one, two. Also, let's say you take your the tail end of a break for Boil the Cabbage Down, and going from a break into vamping backup. So here's the last two measures of what might be your break for Boil the Cabbage Down, and then going into the practice the first two measures of vamping for the progression for Boil the Cabbage. One, two, one, two. Or let's say here we go. You might have your last two measures of backup for something like Cripple Creek or Shortened Bread, and then going into vamping after that. One, two, one, two. Okay, now transitioning out of vamping. What I recommend is not waiting to get out of vamping at the point when the progression starts again, but to get out of it two measures before the progression starts over. so that you're set up and prepared back in your standard position here at the bridge, and your left hand down here in your first few frets, so that you're ready for whatever might be coming next. Sure, you might be going into a round of roll back up, but another thing that might happen, at a jam, you don't always know exactly what's going to happen next. Hey, it might come by surprise. It's time for your break, so you don't want to be all the way up here and then quickly have to get into your break. So getting out of vamping backup before the progression ends, then gives you that time to set yourself up for and be ready for whatever might happen next in the song. So let's take any number of songs that might where the progression might end with D D G G 5 5 1 1. This land is your land. My home's across the Blue Ridge Mountains. Etc., etc. You might practice 2 measures of vamping on the D chord, and then get out of your vamping when it returns to the G chord, and you can start with open strings. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And you can try looping that over and over again to get more practice with it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And of course, another really typical way that a progression will often end is with G, D, G, G. So you might practice that too. That also measure of G vamping, measure of D vamping, and then get out on the G chord and play a fill-in. 1, 2, 1, 2. And just as we did with the last with the last scenario, you can loop that one over and over again for more practice. Or how about the last 4 measures of backup for Cripple Creek? So 2 measures of G vamping, then get out, you're still on a G, and then you have a measure of G, then a split measure, D to G, and then your break might be coming up at that point, or you might be playing around a roll backup, or you might even just go into vamping again. 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, here's the last 4 measures of the progression for Boil the Cabbage Down. 1, 2, 1, 2. Last 4 measures of the progression for Buffalo Gals. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that time we got out on a D7 chord. But I played it in such a way that the first half measure of that D7 was all open strings. So if your fingers didn't quite make it in time to grab the change there at the beginning of the D7 measure, no big deal. But if you can, try to get to that chord shape as soon as you can. Let's do that line one more time. 1, 2, 1, 2. Also, something to notice here about getting out of the vamping is that both hands move at the same time. The hands are kind of together here. The right hand's far away from the bridge. And the left hand is in the mid region of the neck, and then after your last vamp, the hands separate. This one down to the bridge, this one up to your first few frets again. And one more scenario. Let's say you're taking the last 4 measures of the progression for Tom Dooley. Once again, it will involve getting out on a D or a D7 chord. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, let's give it some context here. how about we take the song Bury Me Beneath the Willow in the key of G, and I'm going to play a round of roll backup through the progression, and then a round of vamping backup through the progression, and getting out of the vamping in the last two measures of the progression, and then I'm going to be back into some more. Actually, I'll go straight into a break from that after my vamping backup round. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, how about one more example? Boil the cabbage down, which is usually in the key of A. So we'll capo up and spike up here. Now, of course, this affects our transitions because, well, everything is 2 frets higher. So good idea to work this stuff out not only in G, but also in the key of A, since A is another really popular key, and getting used to the kind of jump that involves, transitioning into the vamping especially, and making sure you hit the right fret numbers for your initial chord. So here, let's say I play a break for Boil the Cabbage, and then I go into vamping backup for the whole progression, and then into some roll backup after that. so on. Okay. And of course, not a bad idea to practice your transitions for vamping in the in other capo positions. Each is going to feel different when you make that transition, especially going from down the neck to up the neck. So B flat. Last two measures of your progression. We have a progression. Let's say it ends with 2 measures of G, then is going into the progression begins again with two measures of G. It's really B flat, but we're still thinking in G because, hey, we're using a capo. So might have 1, 2, 1, 2. You know, try the same thing with the key of B, capo 4. Capo 5 will bring us to C. One, two, 1, 2. Okay. And that is all for today. Happy picking.